Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Friday, May 17th, 2013. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Pow Hana Friday, heading into a weekend. Goodness knows what's going to happen. I mean, everything is just flying back and forth on this thing. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Sam is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. Want to hit a couple of program notes and then an announcement before we get into the content of the show. And boy, we got a lot of stuff to talk about here today. A reminder that next Monday, the 20th, Cindy Sheehan is going to be our on-air guest talking about her bicycle ride, her continuing peace activism. The following Monday, the 28th, Richard Mack is coming back on the show to talk about his Constitutional Sheriffs, Peace Officers of America convention that's cranking up for the first part of June, or actually that whole last week and then into June 1st. But I want to spend the rest of this very short segment here talking about Republic Broadcasting. They are having another fundraising drive. You can go to the Republic Broadcasting. There is republicbroadcasting.org. I'm sorry, that's Republic Broadcasting Network. No, it's Republic Broadcasting. I've actually forgot the URL. republicbroadcasting.org. And there's a donate button there, and there's a phone number there, and they're doing something a little different here. They're asking people to pledge in silver, and I actually did get an email from a listener earlier today that they had pledged 2 1-ounce silver coins to raise money for the continued operation of Republic Broadcasting. And the reason for this is really quite simple to understand. Republic Broadcasting is not getting huge corporate advertisers. We're not getting grants. We're not getting huge checks with lots of zeros in them coming from non-governmental organizations with very shadowy connections. Because when you get those big checks coming in, there are always strings. Take a good look at what Monsanto did out in California. They told every one of the corporate media outlets, you will oppose Proposition 37 or we'll pull our advertising, and those corporate media outlets had to be obedient slaves and bow down to Monsanto and help defeat that proposition. We don't have that here at Republic Broadcasting. That's why we call ourselves the independent media. We are not beholding to giant corporations or to Wall Street or to some government organization that hands out lots and lots of cash. What we're doing, we do entirely from ad revenues from small mom-and-pop businesses and, of course, from your continued generous support. And it is essential to keep that going. Because right now, the money junkies are spending millions and millions of dollars to sell you on a new war or a new vaccine of dubious efficacy and definite harm. They want to sell you on their new too-hip genetically modified whatever it is they want you to rub into your navel. They're just out there to sell you things that make them rich and you poor and your children dead. And we need to stand up to it, because the only way we're going to get that big money corruption out of our society is for the little money to all unite together in that common cause of restoring the Republic. If all 300 million Americans donated just a couple of dollars to the independent media, the corporate media could not withstand that much influence. They get away with it only because they're the big voice out there crying in the wilderness, and everybody else is just sort of off in the shadows, and we're breaking out of the shadows, and we're breaking free. We need your help. So go to republicbroadcasting.org, hit the donate button. If you'd like to do a pledge to the Silver Drive, you can call the phone number there. They'll be very glad to help you out. So we're going to take a break for commercials now that you've listened to 3 minutes of my commercial, and we'll be right back to talk about the Gate. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're getting into the news, and the situation is definitely getting tense. And like I said the other day, get out the popcorn. This is going to be fun to watch here. Former acting IRS Commissioner Stephen Miller is in the hot seat before Congress today, and he's kind of interesting for a guy sitting down. He's out there dancing the Potomac two-step, dodging questions, being very evasive, and every time he's forced into a corner, rhetorically, he comes back with, I don't recall, I don't remember, I don't know, I'm not really sure. Would somebody explain to me how it is that people with such obviously inferior brains attain such high positions in the federal government? Is there something in the water supply of Washington, D.C. that eats your brain cells over time? Is it the SSRIs that a significant portion of them are likely on? Now, the other day when I was explaining what I thought was going on, where how IRS Gate was intentionally leaked to distract from Benghazi Gate, and then DOJ Gate was supposed to cow the media into submission, and that really didn't work. And I was talking about Lois Lerner last week during her Q&A, where she let out the fact that the IRS had been targeting the Tea Party for excessive scrutiny in the handling of their tax-exempt status applications, and it was reported that she was reading from cards, and the people at the meeting thought the question had obviously been planted, and it looked like a deliberate attempt to sort of leak this out just ahead of the Inspector General's own report. Well, now it's been confirmed, because Stephen Miller, in his testimony before the House Ways and Means Committee earlier today, said, yes, that question was intentionally planted. They coordinated with the tax lawyer Celia Rhodey, who asked the question, and yes, Lois Lerner had the answer already on note cards. It was a staged incident. Planted question, prepared answer to put this story out there. They wanted people to know about it. Why would they want people to know about it, considering the fury that it's caused? Because they need a distraction from Benghazi. They needed to take the focus off Benghazi. And in hindsight, I don't think they expected the reaction to IRS Gate to be as strong as it has been. Mostly because once it was out that the IRS was harassing the Tea Party and conservative groups, more and more people have come forward to say, yeah, we were getting the same treatment. It's systemic. It's across the board. Then it came out that Romney's financial backers were all being hit with tax audits, and so it exploded out of control. Now we've had a second IRS official now resign, and Daniel Werfel. Werfel is the new acting commissioner, and then Joseph Grant, commissioner of the agency's tax-exempt and government entities division, is going to retire on June 3rd. So he's getting out of town while the getting is good. A lot of people, and this is from over at Investment Watch Blog, are saying this IRS scandal is well on its way to becoming one of the biggest scandals in U.S. history. And yes, it could. But it isn't just the one scandal. What's going to make it big is it's a triple header. Quadruple if you count the EPA, waiving fees for green groups and so forth. But that's a minor thing. Let's just call it Triplegate. That's the new name, Triplegate. Benghazi, IRS, Department of Justice, emphasis on Benghazi. It's Triplegate. And boy, they are panicking out there over this whole situation. Chris Matthews and Al Sharpton are basically, and remember earlier on I said this was going to happen, Chris Matthews and Al Sharpton are saying Obama critics are simply being racist. If you complain about the IRS targeting conservative groups, you don't really care about the conservative groups, or you're not really angry with the IRS. You're just being a racist. You just hate the black people. It's pretty desperate, considering they're saying this to the people who, we are at least told, voted Obama into office twice here. Then we're getting this other story out of Austria report saying, is the scandal-obsessed Republican Party sounding its own death knell? Are they going to destroy themselves by pursuing this pointless investigation into all these trivial situations? Actually, Richard Nixon supporters were saying exactly the same things about the Democrats. Didn't work back then, not going to work now. Another phrase we're starting to see floating around all of Obama's supporters is scandal fatigue. Oh, the American people are already worn out on this stuff. They're not going to pay attention. We are. You count on it. We are. Now, Representative Levin is out there saying that the Internal Revenue Service showed total disregard for congressional oversight by targeting certain groups, and he calls it wholly unacceptable, and I'm surprised to find myself in agreement with Representative Levin, but he is absolutely right. And they're thrashing around for a hook that they can use to get themselves out of this cesspool they've created with this mess. Stephen Miller was out there saying that it was all just errors. There were no political whatever. It was just errors, random errors that these groups were targeted for excessive scrutiny. Well, if it were random errors, then just as many liberal groups would have been given the excess scrutiny as conservative groups, because the errors would fall down on both sides of the line. The existence of a clear and obvious bias tells us, no, this is not an error, this is policy. And then Stephen Miller came back and said, well, I don't think targeting is wrong. And now there's a new dimension being added to this, because the Internal Revenue Service told the Inspector General that the targeting of conservative groups, Tea Party, Occupy Movement, pro-life groups, groups that were opposing this whole global warming stuff, were targeted in direct response to complaints by members of Congress. Who were those members of Congress that were sicking the IRS on their conservative targets? I forget. I don't remember. I don't know. I can't recall. Boy, oh boy. Same stuff we heard during Watergate, same stuff we heard during Iran-Contra. We're back there. And, pardon me. Let's see. Interesting little story. Angry Obama, he's out there saying this is wrong, this is bad. He's still saying he had no idea what was going on. He only found out about it last Friday. We already know that's a lie. Jay Carney had admitted on Monday the White House was aware of this situation going back several weeks. So we've already got Obama on one lie. But the official line from the White House, which you will believe or the terrorists will win, is that Obama only found out about it on Friday. And it's just those gosh darn subordinates. They were just acting on their own. And they were well-intentioned, but their behavior was inexcusable. And, of course, that leads us back to the Washington Post. And I put an image of this up at whatreallyhappened.com. Now, let me read you the headline from this issue of the Washington Post. Nixon denies role in cover-up, admits abuses by subordinates. So we are. We're back in Tricky Dick territory right now. We need to come up with a cool name for Barack Obama. With Richard Nixon, it was easy, Tricky Dick. I don't know what we're going to do with Barack Obama. I've been working on that all morning. 4 cups of coffee, and I still can't come up with an inspiration on that one. Another dimension of the IRS scandal, marijuana dispensaries and pro-legalization groups were being targeted for delays on their tax-exempt status and hit with audits. And the interesting thing to put out here right now, that everybody's acting like this is a big shock. There's nothing new. The IRS has been basically used as a political hatchet man for decades, going back to and including Richard Nixon himself. And everybody's acting like this whole new shock and scandal, and how could this happen, and we need new laws. There are already laws against this stuff. They just weren't enforced. Everybody was looking the other way. And so now, because of this report by the IRS itself to the Inspector General, that they were being directed against these conservative groups by members of Congress, we now know that this whole rogue employee story is no longer legitimate and valid. We know that the IRS was being unduly influenced from at least Capitol Hill. And again, the fact that Mitt Romney's main financial donors were all hit with audits suggests a link back to the White House. We already know Obama is lying about when he learned about this. So we're back to that Nixon-era question. What did the president know, and when did he know it? Now, we were talking the other day about Larry Connors. He is the news anchor at KMOV, and he had gone on the air saying that he, too, had been hit with IRS harassment following an interview he did with Obama, asking some very tough questions about the Obama family's vacation habits and how much they cost the taxpayers. He is now off the air. He has been taken off the air. Now, the management of KMOV is saying he has not been fired, he has not been suspended. They're just not letting him back on the camera until they figure out what they want to do about this. I'm going to try and get Larry on the show here. So let's see, over at the Telegraph in Great Britain, they're already making the connection between Barack Obama and Tricky Dick. And remember, this idea of trying to dump the blame for this all on the Congress is not going to work. I mean, yes, there's no question members of Congress were trying to steer the IRS against their enemies, but we also know from Lois Lerner herself, the IRS simply went and scanned for any organization with the phrase Tea Party or Patriot in its name, and they were automatically hit with that scrutiny. Now, I want to make a point here. Because everybody's saying, oh, you're like Al Sharpton saying, you're after Obama. No, we're not, because Obama all by himself is not the problem. More about this when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go to the phones real quick. Jim in Georgia. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I've got a name. You're looking for a name for Obama.
Yeah.
I've got Bum Obama is Llama.
Okay, we'll put that on the list of possibles. Let's have a little informal contest. We need a name for President Obama that's as cool and catchy as Tricky Dick was for Richard Nixon. So put on your thinking caps, guzzle some extra coffee, get the brain into high gear, and we'll think about that. Anything else, Jim?
That's it. Bye, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the call and for the suggestion here. Now, to get back to what I was saying just before the break, when you are looking at Benghazi Gate, and I hope you are, IRS Gate, DOJ Gate, there's a principle of history you need to understand. No tyrant in history ever did what they did all on their own. Hitler didn't do all the evils of the Nazis on his own. Stalin did not do all the evils of the Soviet Union on his own. They were able to do what they did because of a vast bureaucracy that was perfectly willing to go along with these abuses. So when we talk, contrary to what Chris Matthews and Al Sharpton is saying, we are not simply out to get Obama. We are out to cure the problem with the system. And it isn't just Obama. Obama by himself can't do any of these things. And so the problem isn't just Obama. It's the members of the Congress who went along with it. It's everybody in the Internal Revenue Service who goes along with it. It's everybody in the Department of Justice and the FBI and the CIA that go along with it. These evils are systemic. It is not the fault of one man or just a few rogues. It is the system as a whole that was perfectly willing to go along with these abuses of the American people. And so in response to all of these emails I'm getting saying, oh, you're an Obama hater, you're after him. I really don't care about Barack Obama. I don't even care if he finishes out his second term. I have a bigger target in mind, and that's the IRS itself and its bitch of a mother, the Federal Reserve, that private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest, which has destroyed what used to be the greatest nation on earth. They are both unconstitutional. The IRS, its very existence is a fraud, resting on the lie that the 16th Amendment was ratified that overturned the earlier constitutional prohibitions against a direct, non-apportioned tax of the American people. So that's the target, fixing the system, or getting rid of the system, replacing the system, not just one man, because if Obama is forced to resign, and we get Biden in there, tell me, what has really changed in terms of what is affecting your life day to day? The IRS didn't learn any lessons from the embarrassments back during Richard Nixon's administration. They went right back to doing the same thing over and over again. Changing the president will have zero effect on our lives. We need to change the system. We need to recognize that it is that system that is the true enemy, and not just one man. No tyrant acts alone. So getting back to Triplegate here. Eric Holder is already out there flatly rejecting the idea of having a special counsel to investigate Benghazi. Remember what I said the other day? Look at the most protected point. That's where you've got to be paying attention to. They're already talking about special counsel for IRS Gate and this DOJ Gate, but no, absolutely not. We're not going to let anybody look at Benghazi. That's what they're most afraid of. That's what they're most afraid of. Because if it ever comes out to the general American public that the raid on the consulate was a botched attempt to kidnap the ambassador so that Obama could look like a hero, it was Obama's October surprise. And it blew up in their faces. If that ever comes out, it delegitimizes the entire government, not just Obama, not just the Democrats. Everybody gets destroyed by this. And that's why they're working so hard to protect it. And I think that's the reason. And again, Stephen Miller's confirmed it. They intentionally leaked the IRS targeting of the Tea Party. They wanted to use a small scandal to cover up a big scandal. But IRS has blown out of their control. It's spinning out of control. And it's a reflection of just how angry everybody is. They're ready to see something to grab onto to say it is time for a change. And then this attempt to use these phone record sweeps of the media to get the media to stay on the reservation, yeah, it worked back in 2006 with ABC. It's not working now. That's blowing up in their face. So now they got 3 major problems and probably more on the way. Going to grab a quick phone call. Chris in Las Vegas. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha. I think you're exactly right. It is all smoke and mirrors, but the name for him I have is the Islamo-Commie Obama.
I like that. I would almost go with Commie Obama and drop the Islamo. We got to keep it simple. You know, too many syllables, people will forget it. It's got to be something that'll stick in their head immediately. Tricky Dick, 3 syllables. I think if we go past 5 syllables, we're in trouble. Okay?
Well, they are a learning challenge, so you're probably right. Thanks very much.
I used to work in advertising. I know these things. We've got to take a break for commercials. I'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I guess our little informal contest has caught the public imagination. Sam in our control room has wanted me to remind everybody during the Clinton administration they were calling him Slick Willie. So we can go out for that. Something that came in the emails. Barack, No Shame Hussein, Obama. Over in the chat room, we've got Dingleberry. That's oddly appropriate there. Obango Tango, Trauma Obama. They're cute and catchy, but they're not really cutting to the heart of what is behind Triplegate. But keep going. You're coming up with some really, really cool ideas here. Now, as I said before, Eric Holder is saying there will be no special counsel about Benghazi, but they're throwing the blame all over the place. And now we have Obama's supporters out there screaming that the blame for the attack on the Benghazi embassy is all the fault of the Republicans because they were cutting funding for security at our overseas installations. And this is, of course, complete nonsense because the State Department budget has gone up every single year. And the budget for the security at the consulates comes out of the Pentagon budget, not state, not subject to congressional whim, and it too has increased year over year. We know additional security was offered to the Benghazi consulate and rejected by the ambassador himself in order to keep the stage clear for this little well-rehearsed dog and pony show that turned into an epic fail. So they're just trying to point their fingers around. Bob Woodward of Watergate fame, All the President's Men fame, he's saying Benghazi is the new Watergate, and he's absolutely correct. Now, the White House position is Benghazi's just a little side issue, and we should all have our knickers in a twist over IRS Gate and DOJ Gate, and yes, we should. But they're lying about that. Benghazi is the main event. DOJ Gate and IRS Gate, they're the distractions. They're the sideshows. It's all about Benghazi. And that's what they're trying to keep you from looking at. Don't let them get away with it. Over at Stephen Goddard, WordPress.com, made a very interesting point. Nixon got into trouble when he released the Watergate tapes with just an 18-minute gap in them. And by contrast, Obama released the Benghazi emails with a 2,880-minute gap in its timeline. Something happened there they don't want you to know about. We know that Orders were given to the CIA and Special Forces to stand down. We know it's been confirmed and officially acknowledged they had a Predator drone overhead, real-timing that attack back to the White House. We know because of the maximum speed of the Predator, that Predator had to be in the air on the way to Benghazi before the attack began. It was a setup. It was going to be Obama's October surprise. And it got out of control. Now, going back to that retired four-star admiral, and I'm blanking on his name right now because I don't have it on the page in front of me, he's saying it started going out of control because some of the special forces refused the stand-down order and went in to try and protect the ambassador, got into a gunfight with the operations group that was playing Al-Qaeda, and that's how the ambassador got killed. And that does make a lot of sense. But the Admiral's explanation for how it got out of control and my explanation, which is that Libyans from all around joined in when they heard the gunfire, are not mutually exclusive. Because we know that ultimately there was a huge crowd around that consulate. So both very well might have happened. And Obama's carefully staged October surprise turned into an epic fail, and now they're trying to back away from it and point the finger of blame someplace else, and they're trying to distract you from it with IRS Gate and DOJ Gate. And we shouldn't let those go away. But just remember, the most protected point is Benghazi. Special counsel for IRS, special counsel for DOJ, Eric Holder, is adamant there will be no special counsels for Benghazi. They don't want anybody asking any questions about that. Alrighty, let's see, over at RIMF.com, they're talking about the Associated Press spying scandal and the crisis of American democracy, and they're absolutely right. This is an attack on the principles this nation was founded on. The Founding Fathers gave the press the right to freedom of the speech, freedom of the press, to enable the press to report to the public when the government did something wrong. That is their traditional job. That's what we're supposed to do, both in the corporate media and in the independent media. We're supposed to catch the government doing bad things, and we're supposed to let you know. That's our job. Now, I want to go back and look at the circumstances that led to this whole grabbing of the phone records from Associated Press, and also from within Congress itself, a violation of the separation of powers. And it all came down to this report published by AP in May of last year about a foiled Al-Qaeda bomb threat. And the official story is it was AP's publication of this report that launched a national security investigation. Now it has come out. The Associated Press got official permission to publish this report from the Central Intelligence Agency. And here's where the timeline gets really interesting, because the Washington Post is reporting that after AP got this report and official permission to publish it, the White House asked Associated Press to hold off reporting it for a few days so the White House could get out there and make an announcement and get ahead of the story. And Associated Press said basically if this was something that really was involving national security, we would do it. But just so that you can look good and look like it's your story instead of ours, we're not going to go with that. And that's when the Associated Press published, and that's when the Department of Justice was asked to go after the phone records of all the AP reporters and congressional offices. So there was no national security motive here. It was a political retaliation. And that puts a whole new dimension on this phone record grab. It wasn't a national security operation. It was a petty, vindictive strike back by the White House because AP wouldn't let the White House steal the thunder on this story. And so now we have the Department of Justice targeting people not for national security. They targeted these reporters of an entire news organization because the news organization didn't do a favor for the White House. That was it. And that is a completely inappropriate use of our Department of Justice. And I want to hit that point very hard. Barack Obama does not own the United States Department of Justice. He doesn't own the FBI, doesn't own the CIA. Those are all supported by tax dollars. They are the property of the American people. If you are an airline pilot working for United Standard Western Oversky Dodge the Clouds airline, you're not allowed to show up to work, hop in the cockpit, and just decide, I'm going to take the plane up to Aspen for some skiing this weekend. It's not your airplane. You are paid to pilot that airplane where the owners of the airplane tell you to take it. If you do anything else with it, it is a crime. It's usurpation. Likewise, President Obama does not own those assets. They are provided to him by we, the American people, to carry out the wishes of the American people, that certain crimes be punished, like corporate fraud on Wall Street, and not to be directed against the owners of the company for the benefit of the president. So when the president is using the IRS and the Department of Justice for his personal political tools, he's guilty of usurpation. Misappropriation of government funds, or government resources, rather. You know, every time they catch a congressman who will use a government plane for what turns out to be a personal trip, and they'll force that congressman to reimburse the Treasury. So we, the American people, ought to be demanding that Barack Obama personally, out of his own pocket, reimburse the Treasury for all the man-hours and resources that were used by the IRS and the Department of Justice in furtherance of his political aims, because that's not what they're in existence for. By the way, the IRS official that was overseeing this whole targeting operation is now overseeing the Obamacare unit. And it raises the possibility that if you are if the way the IRS is treating you on your taxes is being politically influenced by your beliefs, it opens the door to decisions on your medical care being influenced by political belief. We already know that at Obamacare calls at certain ages and certain levels of expense, they're simply going to say it's not worth keeping you alive any longer. We open the door to the fact that two people side by side in the hospital with the same illness, the same age, and one is of the current administration's political party and the other one is of the opposition party, and the opposition party is allowed to die. Sorry, we've only got one liver to transplant. We're going to give it to this guy over here because he voted for the correct politician last election. Even the Soviet Union wasn't that politicized. Okay, let's see. A few more suggestions coming in on the Name Obama contest here. We have the Commander-in-Chief, Captain Clueless. Sounds like a comic book character. I like this one, The Presidents. I like that one. I like that one a lot. Now, a little bit of surprising news, and don't get out the tambourines and the confetti just yet. The House of Representatives yesterday passed a bill to repeal Obamacare. Now, it wasn't passed by a veto-proof majority, but now it's going to go to the Senate, because remember, it's a revenue act, and it must originate in the House of Representatives. Now it's going to go to the Senate. We don't know what the Senate is going to do. If the Senate passes it, Obama can still veto it. And in the current political climate, it's just going to be another reminder that Obama's going to get what Obama wants, and to heck with the will of the Congress, and to heck with the will of the American people. I owe a big favor to those health insurance companies that helped get me elected, and by golly, you will pay them what I owe. Even more interesting and significant, maybe a change in the wind here, and this is why we have to keep pounding on Triplegate. This is your weekend conversation with everybody you know. All this stuff that's going on here, because Congress is apparently starting to rethink the USA Patriot Act. Remember, the USA Patriot Act was all set to go when 9/11 happened. Then they threw anthrax at the Congress to scare them all into passing this bill without even reading it. And now they're looking at it and realizing they basically handed the president a blank check for murdering people around the world. And they're starting to rethink that. And there may be a pushback on the USA Patriot Act. Because the problem with the USA Patriot Act is it effectively declared an unending war on terror. And Washington, D.C. is now basically saying, well, the Pentagon is already prepared to fight the war on terror for 20 years, but for all intents and purposes, the war on terror is permanent. And it is the war on terror itself that is increasing the threat to the American people and the American nation from all those other nations being drone-struck at this moment. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Tom in Texas. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yep. Mahalo, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing just good.
Okay. I can't take credit for this one, but it was something, a reference I read on the Internet about Obama. They've referred to him as Obama.
I've heard that from a lot of places. A lot of places.
Yeah, so have I. But anyway, like I say, I can't take credit for it. But doesn't it give you a nice warm feeling when you find out that you're correct on your assumptions about this Benghazi thing?
Well, you know, every time I get one of those moments there, I usually have two responses. I go back to that line from Jurassic Park. Ian Malcolm is sitting in the car as the T-Rex breaks out of the pen, and he says, gee, I hate being right all the time. And the other line I like to use is, you know, I hate to say I told you so. Actually, I quite enjoy it. And then, you know, trying to make light of what is obviously a very, very serious situation. But maybe it's just because I have been doing this for close to 20 years, and I no longer have any illusions about what the federal government is or even about the people who will sell themselves and their principles to the federal government for their 30 pieces of silver. These things seem very, very clear to me, and if I have one gift, it is to take some very complex issues and present them in a way that is really clear and easy to understand. I'm sort of the anti-jingoist or the anti-jargonist, and I take what is intentionally obfuscated and I strip it down to its core issues, like the 11th Marble. That one did very well out there.
Well, yeah, you're definitely ahead of our politicians, I can tell you that. But there is one thing that I pray that you're wrong about.
What's that?
The armed march on D.C. on the 4th of July. I pray that you're wrong about that.
I hope I'm wrong about that, too. I want to be wrong on that. If they're going to have the march anyway, my best hope would be they march in, they make their point, it's all done peacefully, and they march out and everybody goes home. And so I don't want to be right on that one. In fact, there's a lot of these things I've been saying over the last close to 20 years. I didn't want to be right on them. And,
I understand.
And you just pound your head against the wall and say, oh, wish I didn't know what I know. I wish I could go back to believing in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, but I can't.
Yeah. I say I pray that you're wrong, but I'm thinking that our Congress critters and the president especially, they're probably praying that July 4th comes a lot sooner than it does.
Yeah. They're probably...
Thanks for your time, Mike.
Yeah, you got it. They're probably looking at their calendar every day and say, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, can't get here.
Man, that's
we do
enough, yeah.
we do have Memorial Day coming up here in another week. That's a target of opportunity. Or maybe they don't even need to glue it to a target of opportunity. They could get the distraction away from Benghazi just by really ramping up the war, which brings me to, the situation that's evolving over Syria. We're getting a report that today the Israeli Air Force is overflying Lebanon, just circling airplanes all around the Lebanese villages of Bint Jbeil, Marajayun, Tebnin, and Tufa. And they're just...
They better... excuse me for interrupting, but they need to do it now before they get those S-300s. Because, any enemy of Israel is not allowed to defend themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, Netanyahu said the other day, we have a right to bomb you, you have no right to fight back. It's an absurd statement.
Sick, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's very sick. It's psychotic.
It's a typical bully.
Yes, absolutely.
But you can't fight back.
Right. If you dare fight back, we'll have the Americans come kill you.
Oh, yeah, I'll call up my buddies, yeah?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm out here, Mike. Appreciate your time, brother.
All right, you got it. We're going to take a break for commercials. When we come back, we got another caller waiting on the line. We're going to go right to you. So we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're continuing to get entries in the Name the President contest here, some of which I can't say on the air, or they will yank the license on this here radio station. Let's see. TikTok Barack, Croc Barack, Shylock Barack. Anyway, let's see. We're going to go back to the phones. We've got Glenn in Oregon. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I've got another inverse sobriquet to throw in for America's acting president. It's not even mine. It's from Webster Tarpley. Mm-hmm. He refers to him as Barky.
Yeah, I've heard that many, many times, and that's actually getting a little more appropriate because, Obama's out there barking, saying, I didn't know, I never found out. And again, you need to remember, that's his job. That's the job he's supposed to be doing, not sucking up to Israel, not going up to the UN to protect Israel, not dropping drones all over everybody. His job as the chief executive of the executive branch is to execute the will of the Congress, who in turn are supposed to be executing the will of the American people. Unfortunately, we know that Congress is available for sale to the highest bidder. They're the finest Congress money can buy. Wall Street's got all the money right now, and so does Israel. Anything else, Glenn?
I'm delighted the way I got to set you off. Thank you, sir. Ciao.
All right, you're welcome. Ciao, bello. All righty, so we're talking about Israel is overflying Lebanon. Israel is threatening more attacks on Syria. And this is a follow-on, of course, to Netanyahu's statement that, Israel's going to attack Syria, but Syria better not strike back or the war will be on. And it is bullying, and it's an attempt to basically create this war out of thin air. And Israel's continuing to basically go into the West Bank. They've approved more illegal settlements there. They're pushing back on Palestinian protesters. It's just getting really, really ugly over there. Now, as you're probably aware, Benjamin Netanyahu went up to Moscow to talk to Vladimir Putin to try and talk Russia out of supporting the Assad government. And Netanyahu, and this must have been a horrible blow to the monstrous ego that he has, Netanyahu did not do any better than John Kerry did. And Russia is continuing to honor all of their existing contracts with Syria, including the S-300 air defense missile system and this hypersonic anti-ship cruise missile, which Russia describes as defensive weapons. You're not going to get a cruise missile to go all the way from Syria to the United States, and the S-300, again, can't reach anybody from, inside Syria. It is there to shoot down people trying to bomb you. And Netanyahu is out there screaming that the S-300 missiles could plunge the region into war, and he is absolutely wrong. It is Israel and the United States that are plunging the region into war. All Russia has done is to give Syria the means to actually shoot back at the invading incoming army. And Netanyahu's attitude is, they're not supposed to shoot back. Don't you understand how the world works? We can go bomb anybody, and they're not supposed to fight back. It's in this very ancient text that we got from our imaginary playmate in the sky. We're allowed to smite everybody at will, and they cannot smite back. Going to take a break for station identification. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and the hits just keep on coming. Low Blow Satoro, Sideshow Satoro, they're coming in. Doesn't quite, though, get to the essence of what's going on, the way that Tricky Dick did. But we'll keep on working on this whole situation here a little bit. Let's see. We already talked with Glenn in Oregon. Now, getting back to the situation with Israel and Syria, Russia is probably is already in the process of. I mean, if I were Putin, I'd be sending the weapons right now and not give Israel and the U.S. a window to attack Syria before those defensive weapons show up. Israel has indicated they feel they have a right to attack and destroy the Russian arms shipments going into Syria. And again, Israel's excuse is, well, Syria's just going to give them to Hezbollah. No, Syria needs those. They're going to keep them for themselves. So this idea that Syria is taking weapons they need to protect their country from invasion and shipping them over to Hezbollah is nonsense. And certainly in the case of the S-300, that's not an offensive weapon system. It is the Russian version of the Patriot. It's an air defense system. It's to keep other people from coming into your home and dropping things that go boom. But Israel is saying they feel they have a right to attack the Russian shipments, potentially including shooting down Russian aircraft that are carrying those things. So we're literally at the point of risking a war between Israel and Russia, which means, of course, Israel isn't going to fight a war against Russia. They're going to turn around to Washington, D.C. and say, please, would you please come fight Russia for us? And Obama's going to say, yeah, thank you for getting a war with Russia going. No, that'll make everybody forget about that Benghazi nonsense and the IRS nonsense and the Department of Justice nonsense. Yes, we'll go to war with Russia. And so what Israel is going to do, and I think they would not be too unhappy about this, Israel's just going to sit there quietly doing nothing while the United States and Russia nuke each other into rubble. And then Israel will stand up and say, well, now that those two are gone, we'd like to admit to the world that, yes, we do have nuclear weapons and long-range rockets, and you will now do what we say, or we will blow up the Mideast oil fields and starve you all for energy, and so forth and so on. So this is getting really, really dicey. Back to the phones. Kevin in Kentucky. Aloha. Kevin, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just had a recommendation that you can call Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Call him Baradit for Shuro.
I have to think about that one for a while. That's kind of an interesting little colorful twist. Almost sounds like something out of Day the Earth Stood Still.
All right, well, thanks a lot, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, Obama's official position, and he said this when he was having his little press conference with Erdogan, that he's emphasizing the military option against Syria, but insists the United States won't attack Syria alone. This is a null and void, pointless statement, because Israel is going to attack Syria, and then the U.S. will follow on in and say, see, we didn't do this on our own, wasn't unilateral, we're just aiding our ally and trusted friend in the Middle East against the evil Assad and his evil chemical weapons. More and more media outlets are basically coming out and saying this whole thing about Assad's sarin gas reeks of Saddam's nuclear weapons. It's the same lie all over again, and President Obama seems to feel that you are all stupid enough to fall for that same lie all over again. Or, at the very least, you are loyal, patriotic Americans who will choose to believe the lies over and over and over again, because that is what makes America great. I know better. I know you're not going to fall for that lie again. You're still angry that you were lied to before. And you're not going to go along with that. All right, going to take a break for commercials. Just a reminder, Claire will be with us in hour number 3 today, and we will be right back. Oh, boy, there are some really good entries coming in for the name of the president here. Somebody sent in the suggestion, Tsar Baby. Spelled T-S-A-R like the Russian despot rulers. I like that one. I'm sure that's going to get Al Sharpton's knickers in a twist over that one. Let's see what else we have over here. Okrukma, variations on the theme of Barack Kroc. Another one, Richard O. Nixon. I think that one cuts right to the heart of the matter here. Let's see, do we have any more here? Let's see, Obama Claus, because you have to be crazy to still believe. I love that one here. All right, so we're talking about the situation over there in the Mideast. The CIA chief, John Brennan, has made a surprise visit to Israel to talk about Syria. I'm sure he went up there to Barack's office, knocked on the door, and the door opened, and John Brennan goes, surprise, I'm here. I don't think it was a surprise. It's a surprise to everybody else. So you can see the maneuvering going on. They're trying to get this war going, and when Triplegate began to break into the news, I made the point, this is only going to motivate the Obama administration, and indeed pretty much the entire federal government, to try and get this war going, to use a war to distract from all the other problems. Triplegate, the economy, all the rest of it here. Alrighty, let's see. Over in Turkey, the Turkish people are no more happy with this escalation towards war with Syria than anybody else here, because after all, they're right on their side of the border, and they're likely to see a lot of stuff coming into their country and their homes when the war really gets cranked up. And there are major, major protests. The Turkish people are out there in the streets saying, no, we will not go along with this thing. The Turkish police are using tear gas and water cannons to put down these protesters. So Erdogan may be up there with Obama for the press conference, but the people of Turkey are not behind him on this. And frankly, if you look at the history of war, the people of a nation are never behind the leader who wants to start a war. They have to be tricked into it. They have to be lied into it. Now, over at Strat Risks, they had a big article about how Russia is starting to really build up their military. They're modernizing all their missile systems. At the same time, they're going to the United Nations and saying, you know, we need to start capping all this military development by the United States of America. And they're trying to act like this is a bad thing. But Putin knows ultimately, because Putin took control of their central bank and he kicked out the money junkies, that makes him an eventual target for the United States and for every nation that still has a privately owned, privately controlled central bank. So of course he's going to build up his defenses. He knows that sooner or later the United States is going to be making war on Russia and or China. I think Putin would be perfectly happy to draw the battle lines through Syria and Iran rather than wage that war on their own home soil, especially after how close the Nazis got to Moscow during big mistake number 2. We're going to grab a phone call here. Tom in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha there, pal. Seems like I just talked to you yesterday. Oh, wait a minute, I did.
Oh, okay.
All right, I've been on and off the phone, so I've been listening to your show 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. But how about, I don't know if anybody said this, but how about the Obama drama?
Oh, I like that one. That's a good one. That is a very good one.
Obama drama.
Yeah, the Obama
Remember
drama.
I talked to you yesterday about this IRS thing being a smokescreen?
Yeah, well, I think...
Did you hear, did you see Doug Hagman's article yesterday on Canadian Free Press, I think it was?
I missed that one. Please enlighten us.
Basically, it was almost a repeat of what I told you yesterday, what I thought was going on here, that the IRS story is a cover and a sideshow to get people's mind off of Benghazi.
Yeah.
Because Benghazi is the real trouble here. I agree with you that the IRS and the Federal Reserve are all unconstitutional. And but you gotta when you see a hole in the armor somewhere, you gotta take shots at it. You know?
Oh, that's exactly right, and that's one of the reasons why RBN is having their little fundraising drive right now, because now is the time when everybody has to push. There is a breach in the political defenses of Fortress Washington D.C. And they're pouring all the resources they can into trying to shut this thing down. We, the American people, 300 million strong, have to stand up, and now's the time to get out there and talk. Now's the time to get out there and share with your friends. Now is the time to support your independent media and push back on this thing, because now there's a gaping hole in the credibility and legitimacy of the entire government, and this is when we, the barbarians, have to pour through with our symbolic torches and pitchforks. And now's the time for the push. They're doing a full court press on their side. It's time for a full court press on our side.
Yeah, we cannot let them get away with this. This has got to stay front and center, and I think Obama drama brings that to a head.
Yes, I think it does.
Okay, have a good day.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm probably going to find a place to use that one as well here. We have another caller on the line, Kit in San Diego. Aloha, Kit. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? I just have I have an entry for the Name the President contest.
Yes.
How about Warlock Drone Bomb Ya?
That's interesting. Just got an email with 2 more. Bogus Barry or Sinister Cetero. I think I like Bogus Barry. I like that one.
Hey, Mike, one more thing. I just wanted to let you know I'll be donating to RBN because I just canceled my subscription to a website that claims this planet is some sort of prison, if you know what I mean.
Gee, I wonder who that could be. Yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, every little tiny bit helps. And like I said, the only way we're going to get the big money corruption out of our nation is for the little money to stand up united, working together in concert toward a common goal of restoration of our constitutional republic.
Amen, brother. Hey, take care and have a good weekend, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, as you're probably already aware, the latest round of the P5+1 talks with Iran just finished. Depending upon who you ask, great progress was made or it was an absolute stonewall roadblock. And the issue continues to be that Iran says they will do whatever it takes to convince the world their nuclear program is safe. And the position coming in from Israel and the United States of America is that's not good enough. You've got to scrap it all. You've got to shut down your power station. You've got to shut down your medical isotope facilities. You've got to shut down anything that has anything to do with nuclear technology. And, of course, that represents a huge capital investment by Iran to buy and build all of this stuff, all of which it is legally allowed to have under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran and the United States have both signed. So it is, in fact, the United States that is in violation of that treaty and international law by using the threat of military force to coerce Iran into surrendering their acknowledged rights under that same treaty. Now, following the cessation of this latest round of talks with the P5+1, Iran's chief negotiator has come out and said the problem with all of these talks is Iran is being asked to make all the sacrifices. We're supposed to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 before anything is done for us. And again, this is a negotiating tactic that is classic Israeli and is now being adopted by the United States of America. And the attitude is, you give us everything we want first, up front, then we'll decide whether we're going to do something nice for you. And of course, that's a negotiating position that is intended to fail, so that U.S. and Israel can say, we tried to talk, we made a reasonable offer, they didn't want to go along with it, go ahead and send in the bombers. Now, over in Libya, we're talking about that. The Libyan situation is deteriorating rapidly. The U.S. is already pre-positioning a marine landing force in case they have to go back in and prop up a rapidly falling puppet regime. Protesters closed a Libyan oil terminal and shut down oil exports. About 20% of Libya's 1.6 million barrels a day of oil exports are now just tied up at the dock. And this is the second time in 6 months they've shut this down. And so the Libyan people are clearly not at all happy with their new U.S.-approved puppet regime, and they're very much not happy with their new private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. They want to go back to the banking system Muammar Gaddafi set up, a state bank with a value-based currency, a public currency acting as a public utility, the exact same system the United States was started with after we broke free of Britain. But the United States is now re-enslaved to private central bankers, and they will go off and spend the lives of your children to make sure every nation on earth is enslaved to a private central bank. No nation can be allowed to have a state-issued currency, because a nation with a free currency and a state central bank becomes an economic power that cannot be competed with. Slave systems can't compete with free systems. It's never worked anywhere in history. We're on the wrong side of this battle. This clash of civilizations is actually a war between private central banking and government-issued currencies. That's what the clash of civilizations is about. And I don't need to tell you that nations with a private central bank in control of the economy is a fascist model. So we're on the wrong side of this war. The United States military, your kids, your tax dollars are being spent to bring fascism to the rest of the world at force of arms. And everybody's catching that war fever. Armenia is getting ready for war. I'm not even sure who with. But everybody's picking up the guns and getting ready, saying, tell me who to shoot. This gun is making me crazy. I must kill somebody. Give me some more SSRIs and ammunition. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fox News is reporting that Israel is preparing for military operations in the Golan. We reported yesterday they were moving up armor and artillery into the Golan. And by the way, Israel has already told major oil companies that they can come into the Golan area, which still technically belongs to Syria. Israel's occupying it, but Israel's already there selling the oil to other people. So apparently the U.S. is going to reach its debt limit on Saturday. They're going to run out of money. They're going to default. No wonder they want to get a war going. Alrighty, let's see here. The Center for Constitutional Rights have sent a letter to President Obama calling on him to finally publicly acknowledge the killing of a U.S. citizen by Israel in their attack on the humanitarian aid flotilla. They're starting to say, why are you not protecting American lives from foreign intervention? And I have an article I put up there at whatreallyhappened.com called U.S. Government Treason, and it makes a couple of points from history. Israel's whole excuse for the attack was that there was this foreign naval force that was potentially a threat to them, even though demonstrably that was not so. But they're getting close to us, therefore we have a right to attack. Now, if you go back to World War II, you had this foreign nation, Japan, that was illegally occupying other people's lands in China and Indonesia. There were Americans in close proximity to that foreign nation in the then territory of Hawaii. And even though the Americans had not actually done much of anything, that foreign nation, Japan, decided it had the right to attack and kill Americans just on the off chance that somewhere down the road they might be an inconvenience. And, of course, that was what led to Pearl Harbor. Now, just for a moment, imagine that instead of declaring immediate war on that nation that attacked Americans, President Roosevelt had rushed over to the League of Nations to explain why Japan's attack on Americans was really no big deal. And Japan had a really good reason to attack and kill Americans. And by the way, the humanitarian aid flotilla wasn't the first time. Don't forget Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. Just imagine if Roosevelt, instead of his Day of Infamy speech, had just made excuses why Japan was perfectly right to attack and kill Americans. It was just a simple misunderstanding. And the U.S. Congress, instead of voting war against the nation that attacked and killed Americans, decided to punish those who criticized the nation that attacked and killed Americans. It's quite an amazing fantasy, and yet this is exactly what we have seen this government do in the years since Israel's attack on the aid flotilla. It's just something to keep in mind, put it in context. Back in 1904, an American businessman, Ion Perdicaris, was taken prisoner by Mulai Raisuli. Now, from Raisuli's point of view, he had a good reason to take Perdicaris prisoner, as Raisuli was fighting against foreign occupation of his homeland. Even Perdicaris conceded Raisuli was acting from what Perdicaris considered justifiable motives. Roosevelt did not even view the affair from Raisuli's point of view. He viewed it from the point of view of a president of the United States. Under the slogan, Perdicaris alive or Raisuli dead, Roosevelt sent 7 U.S. battleships with orders to destroy Morocco. If Perdicaris was not released, Perdicaris was then sent home. That should have been the response to Israel's attack on the aid flotilla, which killed an American citizen. We're not interested in Israel's point of view or their rationale. You attack an American in international waters, that is an affront to the nation. And it should have been dealt with as such. At the very least, stop signing all those checks that paid for the bullets that Israel used to kill that American citizen. Anyway, so now the Center for Constitutional Rights is demanding Obama either formally complain about Israel's murder of a U.S. citizen or give a really good explanation why. And it all comes back down to that Israel lobby in the United States of America, which to this very day is still not required to register as a foreign agent. And they've got a hammerlock on our Congress. If you're going to be in the Congress, you have to prove you're loyal to Israel. You have to travel to Israel and put on the yarmulke and get a picture looking somber at the wall to even be considered to be allowed to ascend to positions of power in this country. Anyway. Let's see, looking at some more of these names that are coming in here for the president here. Owanker, Butcher Barry. I like this one, Pinocchio Obama. And every time he tells a lie, he gets another gray hair. And have you noticed how gray he's actually getting? Darth Obama, that's a good one here. Now, there was kind of an interesting little story brewing the other day, and it sort of came and went, and I think maybe this story was allowed out because this is a time when people aren't going to pay for it. Apparently, the Witness Protection Program has lost the location of 2 known terrorists who were in their care, and they're saying, oh, it's poor data sharing. How wonderfully convenient if they need a new false flag terror attack. They've already got 2 patsies singled out to blame it on. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and the entries continue to pour in for the new nickname for President Obama. We have Barry Soprano, Scary Barry, Baranoid. I like that one, actually, quite a bit. Let's see what else we had. The Odramabama. Obamageddon, I've heard that one before. Yeah, it's definitely out there. All righty. Now, following on to the story that I mentioned before, because I got some email about this, I understand that Congress had a vote a while back that supposedly simply erased the debt limit. My understanding is that vote did not actually succeed. And now we're seeing over in the Hill where they're talking about Treasury Secretary Jack Lew today is urging congressional leaders to raise the U.S. government debt limit and insisted the White House is not going to negotiate over the increase because Congress has no choice but to raise the debt limit. So all of this austerity you've all been suffering, the cuts to food stamps, the cut to education, the cut to taking care of our infrastructure, none of it worked. And by the way, there were other scholarly articles we reported on a few weeks back saying that austerity hadn't worked in any nation it had been imposed on, because it doesn't address the actual problem. Private central banks issuing the public currency as a loan at interest by design produce more debt than money with which to pay that debt. And until we have a world leader with the gonadal tissue to stand up and say, that's the core problem, nothing that is being done is going to fix things, make anything better. It's all just window dressing and show for the press. It's just more organized theater to placate the masses. And so they're trying to basically say that this raising of the debt limit cannot be tied in to any further discussions or debate about cutting more spending. They're just saying, you got to do it. Got to do it, or we're going to be in trouble. We're going to start defaulting. And we must preserve the creditworthiness of the United States at all costs, as long as we can get the people to pay those all costs here. If you are maxed out on all your credit cards, and you just get another credit card, that does not make you more creditworthy in the eyes of the credit bureaus. In fact, they're going to start marking you down. Only with the federal government does going deeper and deeper into debt somehow protect and preserve its creditworthiness. They got to be on SSRIs if they're thinking that. Alrighty, I want to talk a little bit about this scandal out in California, up in Kern County. And it all began with a gentleman named David Silva who was drunk in public. And every time I hear that phrase, I'm flashing back to Ron White talking about being drunk in public and says, hey, I wanted to be drunk in the bar. They threw me in the public. But on a very serious note, David Silva, 33-year-old man. People called police. He was wandering around just on the street, very drunk, and people called and complained. And apparently, by the time the police got there, he had actually passed out, was lying on the ground. And somehow, it got into an altercation where these police officers just beat this guy to death, slamming his head with their batons. People called 911 and said, your police are killing this guy. And they told the 911 operators, we've got video. We've got this on video. These cops are just beating this guy to death. And what happened is the Kern County Sheriff's Office went out to everybody who'd called 911 and they confiscated the videos. They confiscated every cell phone, every camera. Some of them came back completely erased. These 7 Kern County deputies are still on duty, have not even been put on suspension. And the Kern County Sheriff's Office is just no comment, no comment, no comment, in conformance with department policy. And it turns out that for all their tyrannical grabbing of cameras and cell phones and erasing of videos, they did not get them all. There is one video of the incident. Very poor quality. About the same quality as the video of the beating of Rodney King, and look at what happened from that. And this is a far more serious situation because Rodney King survived his beating. This guy was beaten to death. Now, I personally confine my alcohol consumption to here at home. I've never been drunk in public. But I am pretty sure that being drunk in public is not a death penalty offense. And you had the witnesses around there calling in and saying, this guy is on the ground, they're beating him to death. Are these cops on SSRIs? Because it's hard to explain that behavior. Rodney King kept getting back up and confronting the police when they beat him up. This guy was passed out on the ground and was struck in the skull 19 times with these metal batons. And they didn't get all the videos, and they didn't have a right to take the videos. Under the rules of evidence, they have a right to ask you for a copy of your video. And I think pretty much any one of us would say, yeah, let me put it on a flash drive for you. But the cops literally went out to everybody they thought was a witness, and they confiscated the phones and the cameras. And in many cases, they simply erased the video before they returned the phones and the cameras. They were covering up. They knew they had done wrong. Apparently now the FBI is getting involved because the deleting of the footage from the cameras does represent potentially obstruction of justice. If those videos are not provided as part of the evidence in any administrative action against these sheriff's deputies, and there may not even be one, they're still on duty. They're still out there looking for more people passed out from alcohol so they can beat them on the skull with their metal poles. This is worse than the Rodney King episode, and look what happened with that. It is a completely disproportionate, unreasonable use of police force on a man already on the ground, semi-unconscious from his own alcohol consumption. You don't need to beat the guy. It doesn't make any sense. And it gets back to this issue of SSRIs. And again, more and more information is surfacing that it's been known all along these drugs trigger extreme acts of violence. 10% of the population are on these medications. We know about all these mass shooters and suiciders who are on or withdrawing from these medications. What is not documented is how many bar fights or episodes of police brutality or spousal domestic abuse are being triggered or enhanced by these medications. Nobody wants to know that. It's going to harm the pharmaceutical industry. But if our police are on these medications, and being a police officer is a stressful job, and if our government officials are on these medications, that's a very dangerous situation. We could be seeing the United States of America literally being melted from within because of a bad pharmaceutical. And somebody's got to start asking this question. Got a caller on the line, Chris in Las Vegas. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there, Michael. It seems to me this would be a really good opportunity for some of those financially depraved, needy attorneys to jump on a 1983 civil rights violation suit.
Oh, I'm sure they're already lining up. I'm sure they're already up.
Well, and wouldn't the taking of the cell phones and videos conflict with the law that says we have an absolute right to videotape our public officios in the performance of their duties, one, and two, isn't that tampering with evidence?
That very, very much so. That's why I'm saying this could result in an obstruction charge. Because the police have every right to ask you for a copy of any pictures and recordings that you made. They do not have a right to confiscate them outright and destroy that evidence.
Wouldn't they need a Fourth Amendment warrant issued on probable cause to take those things?
I would presume so. Again, they can ask for copies of the data, and I can't imagine people not being willing to turn over copies of the data. But to simply grab the phones from witnesses, no, that's completely inappropriate. They can take copies of this. They can demand copies of the photos and recordings. Simply taking the phones and erasing them and handing them back, that's not even investigation. That's outright cover-up here.
Well, absolutely. And if they knew that they were committing murder and thought they were guilty, then they might feel that they had exigent circumstances that necessitated the immediate seizure of the videotapes.
Well, that's exactly the whole point. Obviously, in hindsight, these cops were realizing they'd killed this guy in full view of the public, And they know any video that survives a confiscation winds up on YouTube, which is where this one did. And again, it's just a reminder of what a complete police state we are living in right now. These cops broke tons of laws. They're guilty of aggravated assault, if not outright willful murder. It was a violation of this guy's civil rights. And there's no end to this thing. It is a worse scandal than Rodney King.
Absolutely. It seems to me that we are living without the rule of law, therefore we are in the land of chaos.
Yes, we are. Absolutely. When the police are out there and the police don't even know the laws, there was that other video about this police officer who couldn't even read his own breathalyzer, and this driver, this student he'd pulled over, had to explain it to him why .018 is not 3 times .08. I mean, that's basic high school math, and the police officer couldn't get it. Maybe that officer was on SSRIs.
Last I checked, the law said that police officers are presumed to know the law and be competent in the law, and if they're not, then they must be imposters.
Well, they're presumed to know the law, but obviously they don't. I've had a lot of people tell me stuff, a lot of police officers tell me stuff that I know is absolutely flat out wrong. And very much of it gets into this issue about your right to record them in public. We're seeing some states, just completely misapply anti-eavesdropping laws, which were written in the context of situations where you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, like phone calls, and they're trying to apply them out in the public. Other courts have said, when you're in public, you have no expectation of privacy. The courts certainly reinforce that principle regarding ordinary citizens. And so you have this ludicrous legal fiction where if you have a group of citizens and a group of police officers standing in exactly the same spot, the courts are saying the citizens out there in public have no expectation of right of privacy, but the police officers do. And that is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution.
And in fact, I believe if you check the Constitution, the people have a duty to cast an eye of suspicion and to watch over their public officials to make sure they opt within the scope and color of law.
Well, this gets back to that whole John Bad Elk versus United States Supreme Court decision, in which law enforcement or any government officials have their authority and power only when they are within the limits imposed on them by the Constitution and the law. And if they go outside those limits, if they are violating your civil rights, you have a natural right to fight back with, if necessary, lethal force. And, it's the same thing that we say about the President of the United States applies to police officers. They have that authority and office only when they are following the rules and are acting within the limits of their authority imposed by law and by the Constitution. When they step outside those limits, they're no longer the President. They're no longer a police officer. They're just another thug in a fancy, expensive costume.
Precisely. Title 18, United States Code, 241 and 242.
Exactly. Okay, Chris?
Thank you, Michael.
You got it. Now, getting back to this question, and again, these SSRIs, all this evidence is surfacing. They have known for years that these drugs cause extreme acts of violence, suicide. And now we're finding out that in terms of doing what they're supposed to do, which is cure depression, the actual trials on which their approval was based, the SSRIs did not do any better than the sugar pills. It's a useless product that doesn't work and causes harm, but by golly, they're going to go on selling it to you because it makes money. And they're prescribing them to our kids left and right because of something called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When I was a kid, we called it teacher is boring the crud out of me. And it turns out, the U.S. American psychiatrist Leon Eisenberg, who is viewed as the scientific father of ADHD, said in the last interview he gave before he died, quote, ADHD is a prime example of a fictitious disease, end quote. In other words, the guy credited with coming up with this was admitting this was just an invented disease with which to sell medication to people who do not need it. This stuff is harmful. It is causing death. It is causing violence. It is causing harm. It clouds the judgment of everybody who's taking it, including police officers and government officials. 10% of the American population are on these medications. By default, 10% of all law enforcement officers are taking these meds. 10% of all government people are taking these meds. Probably the percentage within the police and the government is higher because they are stressful jobs that can lead to anxiety and any one of these other conditions that the American Psychiatric Association insists is a disease that must be treated with medication. We need to know if these cops who beat this guy to death were on these prescription antidepressants. And we certainly have a legitimate need to know if Barack Obama is taking these, and his cabinet is taking these, and if the military high command are on these medications. During his first term in office, there was actually an article in the corporate media saying President Obama was dealing with serious depression during his first term. How did he get out of the depression? I don't see him doing yoga. Remember the abuses of the White House doctor when Bill Clinton was in office? Huge scandal. The White House doctor was just pills and shots and whatever Clinton wanted. Huge scandal. Some of this stuff that you and I would not even be allowed to get near. Anyway. Senator Jeff Markley is planning to push an amendment to repeal the Monsanto Protection Act. I think it's a very, very good idea. When we come back, I got one more comment about Monsanto, and then, of course, top of the hour, Claire will be joining us. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and the corporate media is now on to reporting about the Powerball jackpot is a new record, $600 million. And if any of you listening to the show have that ticket and win, don't forget to include Republic Broadcasting and What Really Happened in your generosity, because we need your help right now. We don't have big corporations supporting us. By the way, a message going out to all those people in Kern County who had their phones and cameras confiscated by the police and came back with the files deleted. Unless the police use special applications to physically overwrite that area of your memory, those videos can be recovered. They are still there. They're just not visible to the file system. That's true for pretty much every computer that's out there. Just hitting delete, dropping it into the trash bin, doesn't actually get rid of the data. It's still there in the memory. You just need the special tools to get it out there. Now, getting back to Monsanto, the company we all love to hate, and of course there's this big global protest coming up on the 25th. And we have, countries like Peru just banned GMO. Hungary is physically scorching all the farmlands that were contaminated with GMO food. And so now we have Hugh Grant, who's the CEO of Monsanto, basically saying that anybody who's criticizing GMO, you're just being elitist because you think you are in love with nature and organic, and your desire is to keep poor people from cheap food. That's their new argument. You shouldn't criticize us. We're providing cheap food to poor people. No, you are not, Monsanto. Your seeds are hideously expensive. The yields from GMO crops are consistently lower, less food than the natural counterparts. The GMO plants are proving to be far less resilient to the vicissitudes of nature than the natural varieties, like the BT cotton disaster, far less resistant to drought or extremes of nature, so entire crops can be lost. And then finally, it has already been shown that over the course of a few growing seasons, all of the so-called advantages of GMO crops, the ability to resist pests and weeds, eventually go away. The pests and the weeds adapt to the new chemicals in the GMO crops. So the farmers have to go back to spending money on all the same chemicals they were pouring on their farms before the Monsanto seeds. So it's an outright lie to say that GMO crops are providing cheap food to poor people. It's just providing more money and a guaranteed continued market to Monsanto. They want to take control of all food production on planet Earth. And the U.S. State Department's helping them do it. because they want to, they've lost the petrodollar deal, now they want the corn dollar. You have to come to the U.S. to get all of your food. You have to pay for it with the money we demand. We got to take a quick break. I know we got a caller waiting on the line. We're going to take the call as soon as we come back, and then we'll be joined by the lovely Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We've got a caller waiting on the line. Art, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, and I'm a little bit old school country, and around here, around these parts, we say, Miss Claire, hello, I look forward to Fridays.
Thank you.
It's always great to hear your wonderful womanly words of wisdom.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
I'll try to make this, I'm just trying to suck up to the boss here, okay?
Well, at least you know who the boss is.
Hey, I'm married too, man, I know.
You know, the secret of our marriage is really very simple. I don't try and run her life, and I don't try and run my life, and we get...
Stop. Do not go there, sir.
I'm sleeping on the futon tonight, probably.
No, you're not.
Okay.
Right, I'll try to make this quick so we can get on. I do kind of have to take issue with something you said a little while ago, Mike. And I have a great deal of respect for you. You do wonderful work, and I'm all there with you on most issues. But anyone who knows me knows I'm really hardcore about language.
Yes.
And whenever people start talking about violation of civil rights and civil liberties, I really have to take issue because when people refer to civil rights and civil liberties, I'm quick to remind them, if you are relying on civil rights and civil liberties, then what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a position of being what many of us refer to as a 14th Amendment citizen, thereby under the jurisdiction of the corporate United States, not the United States of America. And you must remember, civil liberties and civil rights are granted to the people by the government, and anything that is granted to you can be taken away from you.
Well, you see, I disagree with you because the reason we use the phrase civil rights and the Bill of Rights, and it is the Bill of Rights and not a Bill of Suggestions, is as a reminder to the government that they may not trespass certain lives. We do not rely on the government to grant us any rights. We're reminding the government they may not infringe on rights that are already ours. And this includes rights that are not specifically enumerated in the Constitution. That's what the Ninth Amendment's all about.
Well, and I totally understand that. I really do. I understand where you're coming from. But I always try to be very specific in defining the difference between civil rights, as I've explained it, and what I refer to as natural or unalienable rights.
Inalienable rights.
By our Creator.
Inalienable rights is how it's pronounced. Well, see, that's the whole point. What we're saying when we talk about the Bill of Rights is those are the inalienable natural rights that we already have. And the contract with America that is embodied in the Constitution of the United States is, we the people will allow you to run this country only so long as you understand there are limits to government power and you may not trespass on our right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to keep and bear arms, freedom from unreasonable search and seizures. When you cross that line, you have broken the contract and you are no longer the legitimate government of this land.
Right. And you're absolutely right. What these cops did was just an outright violation of what I think of as being one of the most fundamental rights, and it's right there clear in the Declaration of Independence. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And notice the first one there is the right to life. And
absolutely.
They outright murdered this man.
Yes. Well, again, we all recognize the Declaration of Independence as an organic founding document, but it's not actually cited in law. I think what we need to look at is, again, in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, no man's life, liberty, or property may be taken from him without due process. You know, getting clubbed in the head with a metal pipe 19 times when you're lying passed out on the ground is not due process. And these police officers need to be brought up on first-degree murder charges and sent to the electric chair and flick that switch up and down a few times to get the corrosion off. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with Claire soon. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I got one more comment about this situation up in Kern County where this David Silva, who is Hispanic, was literally beaten to death lying on the ground. And the cops are trying to cover it up, but they didn't get all the videos. One of them is out there. These people who had their cameras and cell phones confiscated, unless the police use special software tools to physically overwrite that portion of the memory, those videos they shot of the police doing this are probably still in there and can be recovered. But if this crime, which is far worse than the Rodney King beating, because Rodney King survived his, this could spark outrage within the Hispanic community, and it could lead to more riots just like we saw in Los Angeles. And should that happen, then all of these illegal immigrants that Obama thinks are such a blessing on this country are going to turn out to be a major, major headache. Now, for those of you on Justin TV, this gorgeous creature sitting here behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who joins us every Friday in our third hour to bring her unique perspective into the discussion. And what is the first thing you want to talk about?
Well, the first thing that I'd like to address, and it's very probably something that people have not seen on the corporate news. You alluded to a very nasty meeting between Netanyahu and Putin earlier this week.
Yes.
Well, the other thing that made President Putin very furious, even after Kerry had committed to a peace process and peace conference, yada, 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 guess what the U.S. military was doing? And this was last Tuesday. There was a docking at Israel's Red Seaport of Eilat of the USS Kearsarge, carrying 1,800 guys and 20 V-22 Osprey helicopters, which Defense Secretary Hagel had promised to supply to Israel during his April visit. That can't have made Putin happy.
No, absolutely
because,
not.
You know, he's seeing that this is a massing of forces. So what has Russia done? There are two situations that we need to pay very close attention to. Russia has sent at least 12 warships to Syria to patrol waters near its naval base in Tartus. And the Russian Pacific Fleet warships have entered the Mediterranean for the first time in decades, parking at Cyprus. Guys, all of the stuff taken together is double plus on good. It's really nasty. And it indicates to me that we are having a ramp up, potentially, to war with Russia over Syria.
Well, at this point, there are two factors. We know that ultimately the money junkies behind all of these private central banks see Russia and China as very much an enemy because of the association in BRICS, because of China's gold yuan, because of Russia's daring to take control of their private central bank and to, stop them from running the nation's money supply as a personal little money-making scam. And so these money junkies, who have not hesitated throughout history to send hundreds of millions of human beings to horrible death and disfigurement, they're getting ready to do it again to make the world safe for private central banking. And that's a really dumb reason to incinerate the surface of planet Earth, in my opinion.
And this thing about an alleged peace process or conference, the rebels in Syria have said that they will not attend. So, what if you give a conference for a peaceful resolution and the rebels don't show up? They're not going to show up, Mike. They're not going to be there.
Actually, the way that's coming down now is there is the hired mercenary army and the so-called rebels who are on the ground in Syria, and the United States has been forming a new replacement puppet regime who are not actually part of the war. They're just set up as a ready-to-go drop-in replacement for the government of Syria, and the United Nations has already said this new manufactured replacement government is the legitimate successor to Assad. So all those people on the ground in Syria who are chopping the hearts and lungs out of their enemies and eating them on camera and the rest of that, they're going to be kicked. They're not going to be the new government of Syria, regardless of what they're thinking. And so, Obama really needs a war right now because, they tried to use IRS Gate to distract from Benghazi Gate, and they used DOJ Gate to try and quell the media down. Both have flashed up in their face big time, as did Benghazi Gate. And the only thing that's going to save Obama right now is some big, major distraction, either a crash of the economy or a major war. And if the economy crashes, we, the American people, are going to point the finger of blame where it deserves to go, the Federal Reserve and their little Ponzi scheme banking scam. And so that leaves only one option, and that is to somehow get a war going. Will they do a new 9/11 or a new Pearl Harbor? Yeah, at this point, anything is possible.
And the one thing that people need to be aware of with al-Assad is as long as he's got the loyalty of his military, he will be left standing unless the U.S. and whoever else, Israel or whatever, goes in and does an overt attack.
Well, that's obviously what Netanyahu's getting ready to do. They're going to go in and bomb more weapons. Syria will strike back. Israel will do a full-on invasion, and the U.S. will come in behind them. We have a phone caller on the line, Mike in Minnesota. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I was wanting to know what your thoughts were on this. Like, could this happen possibly this summer? Is with this bail-in stateside?
Oh, you mean a haircut that's more of a scalping?
It's more of it's a castration is really what it is. Well, one of the talking points I didn't get to today, but it's on my list, is the European Union has effectively announced that what they did in Cyprus is going to be implemented across the European Union. They got away with it in Cyprus. The Cypriot people didn't stand up and burn down their government and the banks. And so now this is the new normal. When the banks run out of money, they'll just take it from their own customers. We're being sold that this is necessary to protect the trust and faith and creditworthiness of the financial system, which is already in default. When they're having to steal from their own customers, that's a failed bank by any reasonable definition of the word. We know Bernanke is out there saying it's never going to happen in the United States, the contagion will never come here, and yet we know because of those derivatives, those credit default swaps sold by Wall Street against Europe's debt, it has to come here sooner or later, and yes, they will engage in wealth confiscation. They've already started. They've looted Social Security for all of its surplus cash. They engaged in this massive round of fraudulent foreclosures. People lost their homes through outright fraud by the banks, for which they got a settlement of $300, and those checks were bouncing.
Yeah, that was outrageous.
If they succeed in getting the guns, and I think that's going to be what they're trying to do with this Adam Kokesh march into Washington on July 4th, is have a pretext to suspend the Second Amendment and order everybody to turn in their guns. And once they do that, they're going to come out and say, you've got to give us your gold, just like Roosevelt did back in 1933. And they'll give you a big stack of ink and paper in exchange for your gold, and it'll be completely worthless. And, yeah, that's where we are. That's the state right now. Yes, it's going to happen here. They may not call it a haircut. They may not call it bail-in. They'll come up with some euphemistic name, some acronym like TARP or whatever. Just drop a set of Scrabble tiles on the ground, and whatever it comes out with, that's what they're going to call this. But it's going to amount to the same thing, stealing from the people to give to the banks.
Honest to goodness.
Yep.
Afraid so.
My one deal is for you, since you live in Hawaii, this is what you really need to market and stuff for the people out there. Now, this is all freeze-dried. Chicken lau-lau, chicken katsu, Nippy's chili.
Yes.
Char siu bao.
I love the char siu bao, but char siu bao doesn't freeze-dry very well. I tried it once. It was like styrofoam. Actually, what I was thinking about doing is going down to the beach and scooping up all this debris from the Fukushima reactors and selling it as self-powered night lights on eBay.
Oh, there you go. And then you got your strawberry guava ice cream.
Yeah. Oh, look, we're going to have to let you go. You're making me hungry, and I'm trying to get back on my diet. So, Mike, thanks an awful lot for the phone call there. All righty, what is next on your agenda?
Well, it's the economy.
Yes.
And it's not doing terribly well.
No, it isn't.
There have been signs of growing economic and social distress in the U.S., which is coinciding with an accelerating downturn in Europe and slowing growth in China. And the number of people in the U.S. who filed new claims for unemployment benefits grew by 32,000, hitting 360,000 in the week ending May 11th, significantly higher than economists had predicted. Also, the U.S. industrial production fell last month, registering its sharpest decline in 8 months. No one can look at these numbers, Mike, and say that there is any kind of a recovery whatsoever.
Well, again, Obama's lying to us about the reasons for war with Syria. He lied to us back in 2008 when he said his first act as president was going to be to end the wars and bring our kids home. He lied to us when he said he was going to close down Guantanamo. He lied to us just on Monday, saying that the first he learned about IRS Gate was the preceding Friday, when Jay Carney, the White House spokesdrone, said the White House has known about it for at least several weeks, and obviously probably far earlier than that. So the man is a liar. We know the unemployment numbers are being cooked through, all this recategorization and various other chicanery. The real jobless rate in this country is somewhere between 30 and 40%. It's even worse than the Depression of the 1930s. We're now seeing middle-aged Americans committing suicide in numbers similar to what we saw in the Great Depression. And we're there. We're back in the new Great Depression. It's the Grand Depression. The last one we called the Great Depression. This one's bigger and more powerful and more horrible. It's the Grand Depression.
Yes, and sort of to follow that through, Piers Morgan was interviewing Jay Carney, the White House spokesperson. And Jay Carney said something very interesting in that interview. He said, I don't see any scandals, nothing to see here. Go along, just go along your business, nothing happened. And I would have to point out to him that he is very disconnected from most American people because they know that laws were broken, and what's even worse, trust was broken.
Well, to be the White House press spokesman, you have to be able to stand there with your hair on fire and claim you don't smell smoke. We'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to the show. And Claire, you had one more topic you wanted to mention.
Yes, I did. Israel yet again. Israel's deficit cure, new taxes on occupied Palestinians. Hooray. Not. And apparently the budget talks in the Knesset had begun to sort of unify around a scheme to unilaterally amend the Oslo Accords with a provision allowing the Israeli Defense Ministry to impose quote-unquote tolls on Palestinians in the occupied territories for allowing them to import and export goods.
Now, of course, this is completely inappropriate because when you enter into a treaty, whether it's Camp David Accords or Oslo Accords, you basically say this is what we agree to do. And what Israel is doing, and has done many times in the past, is after everybody agrees to the deal, they come in and they say, I am altering the bargain. Pray I do not alter it any further. I do a very lousy Darth Vader. But, that's what they're saying, is we agreed to this and you agreed to that, but, we're going to change the deal to our benefit. And really, if you stand up and complain about it, you're just being anti-Semitic Jew haters again.
Yep. That's where we are.
Yes.
And I can imagine that the Palestinian government is just going to be absolutely head over heels in alarm over this.
Well, they'll take it to the United Nations, and the United Nations will harumph, and should it go to the Security Council, the United States will stand up and go, veto!
Yep.
Veto, veto, veto!
Yes.
Susan Rice is going to stand up with that glazed look on her face, juiced up on SSRIs, and say, I must veto. I must veto.
Yeah, the outrages against the Palestinian people, it's so difficult because there are so many and
it's
so
not
widespread.
Just outrages against the Palestinians, it's outrages against the Lebanese, it's outrages against the Syrians, it's outrages against the American people.
Yep.
And it goes on and on and on.
But you know something, Michael, I remember in classical Greek mythology, there was a concept, and that concept was hubris.
Yes.
And ultimately, hubris always brought that hubristic person down, that overweening pride, that quality within them became their own worst enemy.
Well, I think we're seeing it already very much on display with Netanyahu coming out with this idea that Israel has the right to attack and drop bombs on any nation it feels like, but those nations have no right to fight back against Israel. I don't, with the exception of the United States government, who I am convinced are on SSRIs, nobody's going to buy that as a rationale.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Yes.
I wish that there were some adults in the bowels of power in Tel Aviv who realized that going on this way was going to be detrimental to Israel's survival, and yet there don't seem to be any.
No, it's basically, politics in general is like a giant cesspool. The really big chunks are going to rise to the top. And these people are in these positions of power because they're utterly ruthless and self-serving.
Yes.
Again, we've said this many, many times before. It is the doom of political power that it attracts the very sort of people who should never be allowed to have it. Have you ever noticed that some of our best presidents in this country got the job by accident? Like Harry Truman, who never really thought he was ever going to be president. He didn't even want to be vice president because John Adams had said it's the most boring job in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And Truman signed on to Roosevelt's final term of office to help Roosevelt win, and figured that was kind of going to be the end of his political career. And the next thing he knew, he was the president. And he wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. You know, he did agree to drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, more to prove to the Russians we had those weapons and the will to use them. But again, it's this horrible situation where people, we've made the office of the presidency so powerful and so enriching.
And so imperial.
We've made it too attractive. And people are going to be willing to do anything at all to get that office. And then we shouldn't be surprised once they're in that office, they're willing to do anything to get it. Obama is a perfect example. We now know fraud was involved in his election campaign in 2008. We know the elections are completely rigged in this country. And Obama basically sold out you, the American people, to his donors to get into that Oval Office. And now that he's in the Oval Office, he's sicking the IRS on conservative groups, sicking the Department of Justice on the corporate media. It's a horrible situation, and that is the reason why the founding fathers of this country deliberately made that central government weak, to keep it subservient to the people, and also to make it less attractive a target to the money junkies. They tried to keep the power junkies out of Washington. They tried to keep the money junkies out of the banking system. Subsequent corrupted and corruptible governments, administrations, let them back in and started the disaster all over again.
Right. And today it seems like we have government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations.
That's even narrower than that. It's government of the money junkies, by the money junkies, and for the money junkies. They have simply bought themselves a government and used that government to legislate more transfer of wealth from we, the American people, into their pockets. That's all that the private central banks are, a mechanism to rob the poor to give to the rich. It's at this point in the story that Robin Hood starts shooting arrows into the rear ends of certain individuals.
Absolutely.
All right, we got to take another break here, and is that it for you, Claire?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And you know that Federal Reserve note, that little piece of paper with ink on it, controls your life. That Federal Reserve note is your slave chain. It's a paper chain, but it's still a slave chain. To keep you under the control of the banks that are authorized to legally print this ink and paper, then loan it to you at full face value plus interest. And by design, private central banks create more debt than money to pay that debt. And over time, everybody gets so desperate to find some of these pieces of paper and ink, they'll do anything to get it. Women will sell themselves sexually to get ink and paper. Businesses will sell poorer quality products that are dangerous, to get that piece of paper and ink to give back to the bankers. And it only works because people believe this is the way it's supposed to be. And the private central bankers, the money junkies, are trying to keep you using their system and crush out of existence anything that competes. That seems to be the motivation for the clamp down on Bitcoin. They don't want people to have an alternative currency to use amongst themselves. They don't want the rest of the world to have an alternative currency to use among themselves. And I want to read you something off that Federal Reserve note. Right here above and to the left of George Washington, it says, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private." But there's a word missing from that. Only. This is not the only tender for debts, public and private. And yet that is the attitude we are seeing from the government of the United States of America when they go out and they shut down the Liberty Dollar and the Ron Paul dollar. We have taxpayer-funded law enforcement enforcing a monopoly of a privately owned central bank, all of which is completely unconstitutional. The private central banks understand the only way they're going to achieve their new world order is for any other system of banking or currency to be crushed out of existence, whether it's Bitcoin, the Liberty Dollar, the gold dinar, or the gold yuan. That's the reason for this rush into a new world war, is to make the world permanently enslaved to private central banks and condemn all of the human race to an eternity of debt servitude. This is a war for the freedom not of one people, but of an entire planet. That is how serious it is. Look at what private central banking has done to the United States over the last 100 years. Look at what private central banking is doing to Europe right now. That is the fate that awaits the entire world, all of humanity, unless it is stopped while we still have the chance. We're going to grab a phone call here. Shane in Raleigh. Aloha, Shane. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, man. Great show as usual. Hey, I just wanted to mention a couple of quick things. First of all, just to make a mention that, and I've had 3 Facebook accounts deleted in the last 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just been out of control. And I'm talking about, no profanity, no nothing, definitely political stuff. But
yes,
that's just
no. Facebook was caught deleting every Facebook account talking about the Nakba. I mean, it's just outright blatant censorship. It's not going to work. People just aren't going to go to Facebook. 10% of Facebook's users are artificially created to run up the favorites and follower numbers and post propaganda.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Hey, I was also curious, are you familiar at all with a relatively new independent movie that's been made called Operation Terror?
Have not seen it yet.
Unfortunately, there's no way to see it, but you can check out the trailer on YouTube, or, they've got a website and stuff like that too, but it's called Operation Terror. And as far as I know right now, the only way to see it is to buy the DVD. Definitely really good. There's obviously a lot of, disagreement over the events of 9/11 and how people, think it went down. But in my opinion, this movie, it does a fictional movie that the names of course have been changed, but essentially it really spells out what really happened. Very, very cool movie, and actually done really well.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty high budget. It's
well. What is the basic storyline? Is it about 9/11 and an alternative view?
Yeah, essentially what it is that. And it crams in as much detail, as a 90-minute movie can do. But essentially, most of the solid, most of the most solid narrative, the most solid research is kind of presented as to, as that's what happened. And the guy who made the movie, he said it's kind of and I agree.
Okay, well, can I sort of pull you back to the core issue? I mean, who does he say was behind 9/11? And please tell me that he didn't fall for that nonsense about no plane at the Pentagon.
Actually, the Pentagon thing, that's kind of, for the viewer to decide.
Okay.
However, the reality of,
okay.
The possibility of UAVs that look like
wait a
jetliners.
minute. Okay. You didn't answer the first question I asked you. Who does he say is behind all of this?
Well, it basically has a fictitious organization in the movie.
All right. Well, then basically it's another piece of propaganda. We're going to let you go. We're running out of time. I want to switch over to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? The thing is, I was sitting there reading throughout history. And, the thing is, they don't talk about in history. Do you know when the banking establishment or the money changers threatened a government or a people? And what they would, Muslims would set out a fatwa against the bankers. And in our Constitution, it's called letter of marque of reprisal, because these bankers start wars. And if Muammar Gaddafi was alive today, I would have issued a letter of marque of reprisal. Go after the bankers. Go after the source.
Well, it would be denounced as an act of terror in the corporate-owned media, and we know that a lot of these so-called terror attacks that are being waved at us usually do involve a bank branch somewhere. but they can't find the core issue because obviously, the top-level money junkies, where they live is very secret, where they meet is very heavily protected. And that's just kind of always the way it's been. This illusion of a democratic government that is put on display is really the sacrificial lamb, or the sacrificial goat staked out there to take the focus of the public anger and obfuscate the fact that the real cause of all of our hardship and hunger and starvation and homelessness is that private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. And people need to understand the idea of the 11th marble. They need to understand that the creation of the Federal Reserve was itself a violation of the Constitution, because the Constitution vested money creation authority with the civil government, and it should have taken an amendment to transfer to anybody a private central bank. We know all the founding fathers said, do not allow private bankers to control the issuance of the money, or we will be their slaves. And so it's not like they didn't know what they were doing when they sold us back into that slavery. And, the other thing you need to understand, and this is something that should be getting a lot of attention right now with this latest IRS scandal, and that is to the fact that the 16th Amendment on which that whole income tax machine rests was never, ever ratified. It failed ratification. Secretary of State Philander Knox lied to the Congress, lied to the people of the United States of America when he declared it was ratified. And nobody has been able to prove otherwise. What the IRS will do is if you bring this up as an issue in court, they will hit you with all kinds of unpayable fines. They basically come in. In fact, when they were being challenged during that whole making of Aaron Russo's film, America from Freedom to Fascism, when all these taxpayer organizations would said, show us the law, show us, how do you justify all this? And the IRS said, our answer is done through enforcement actions in the courts. In other words, they don't have to explain anything to you because they can't. They're just going to beat on you until you see the world their way. But we know that in Sullivan versus United States, the judge in that hearing, James C. Fox, states quite clearly in the court record, on examination, the 16th Amendment actually failed ratification. And so it's all a big lie to defraud you of your work product to put in the pockets of the private central bankers.
Well, going on the 16th Amendment, what about the 17th Amendment? I think if we could prove that was never ratified, we can eliminate 100 years' worth of bad law because we have an illegitimate sitting Senate.
Well,
it should be chosen by the legislature, not by popular vote.
I agree with you. The 17th Amendment is really where the authority of the states over the federal government really began to be sabotaged. Knowing that they played fast and loose with the 16th Amendment, knowing that they played very fast and loose with the Federal Reserve Act, it's prudence demands we go back and look at every letter of the law. The problem with that is our government isn't really concerned about the letter of the law anymore, or the letter of the Constitution. They are flagrantly violating their own laws, left and right, secure and serene in the knowledge that we, the American people, won't do anything about it. Look at all the money sent to Israel, from your pockets to Israel, 4 times the entire cost of the Apollo Moon program, and all of it illegal under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act, because Israel does have nuclear weapons. They will not sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They will not allow IAEA inspections. The U.S. government breaks its own laws to take money from you and give it to Israel.
Well, also, too, under the letter of law, the Israeli American Political Action Committee, AIPAC, they should be registering as a foreign agent.
They should.
And, it's just like, it's like with Agenda 21. It's more like even some of the local leaders are starting to find out that a lot of these NGOs are unregistered foreign agents that they're contracting with, that under Texas law and U.S. law, it's illegal because they're unregistered foreign agents.
Well, the whole idea of political power is you get to pick and choose who the laws are applied against. You're going to apply all the laws against your enemies. You're going to turn a blind eye to your friends. That's why SEC was turning a blind eye to what Bernie Madoff was doing. This is what the IRS has been doing. They're targeting political enemies for extra scrutiny. And the converse to that is we need to start asking, who got a free ride? Who was allowed to simply violate the tax laws and get off scot-free because he was buddy-buddy with somebody in political power. There have to be two sides to that coin out there. And the entire system has become corrupted. And as I said earlier in the show, and I'm going to have to let you go really soon here. As I said earlier in the show, when you have Chris Matthews and Al Sharpton saying that we're just out to get Obama because we're racist, and that's nonsense. There are two things in this world I can't stand, racism and Mexicans on the beach. But getting back to be more seriously, we're not out after Obama because Obama by himself could not do all these abuses.
That's true.
It's everybody who was inside IRS who went along with it, everybody inside Department of Justice, FBI, CIA who went along with it, they are all equally guilty. It is a problem with the system as a whole, not any one individual. And we need to really address that. This government has declared itself free of its constitutional restraints, and we are paying the price for it. And we're heading to a major crisis, and like they did the last two times. Every time they reach this breaking point, they go off and start a world war. Anyway, listen, got to finish up with you because we got one more caller I got to get to before the end of the show.
Have a good weekend. This government's so corrupt, they're going to self-destruct. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
This government is so corrupt and crooked, they have to screw their socks on in the morning. Alex in Texas. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. On a Friday to you, I guess, because
yes.
You guys are out in Hawaii.
Yes, we are.
Just wanted to tell you, the international capital controls on the dollar have begun. There's a tax of $35 U.S. being charged at both ends of the Salvadoran border, one with Honduras and one with Guatemala.
Yes.
And the reason for that is people are going into Guatemala, people from El Salvador are going into Guatemala and seeing a huge price difference in their currency exchange. So Guatemala, in order not to have to deal with an influx of unwanted dollars, has raised its tax to get into the country, and so has Honduras, by something exorbitant. A Salvadoran only makes about $4 to $6 a day. Their tax to get into the country is $35. So anyone crossing borders from a dollarized nation into a non-dollarized nation is going to be feeling it very much. And I believe that these are the beginnings of the capital controls to so foreign countries don't get too much of an influx right away. And I just wanted to kind of tell you that.
Okay.
Something that came to my attention today. And I'll let you go. You enjoy your weekend. You definitely deserve it. You worked hard this weekend.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much here. And yes, when we're off the show here, Claire and I have to go out. Today's our day where we do our little volunteer work over at that Feeding the Hungry program, and the lines are getting longer and longer, and the median age is getting younger and younger. All righty, I want to basically remind everybody, we talked about this at the very top of the show. Republic Broadcasting needs your help. We do not get huge corporate sponsors. We do not get large checks with lots of zeros from non-governmental organizations with very shady origins. We do not have huge grants coming in from the money junkies. The money junkies spend their money to make themselves more money, to sell you a new war, to sell you a new policy, to sell you global warming, to sell you bad pharmaceuticals. We don't do any of that here. So Republic Broadcasting is very dependent right now on your support. And now is when you need to basically step up to the line. We are in a major battle. We've got this wonderful opportunity of Triplegate, which has opened up a breach in the political wall around Washington, D.C. It has got Americans starting to ask important questions. We need to reach out and get those people in here to Republic Broadcasting where they can learn the answers to their questions. We need your help to do it. You can go over to republicbroadcasting.org and hit the donate button, or you can call that phone number there to pledge a donation in silver, and I understand a lot of people are already doing that. So if you have a giant stack of silver somewhere in the back, just grab a coin off of that. If everybody listening to this show sent in a $1 silver coin to Republic Broadcasting, we would be funded to grow and reach more people, get more on-air affiliates, get back on shortwave, all of that. Now is when we need to make that extra effort to reach the public. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to sum up on this Friday, give you some stuff to think about over the weekend here. We are at an historic point in the history of the United States of America. We're on the verge. We're being shoved forward into big mistake number 3. We're looking at the potential collapse of the entire worldwide private central banking system all at the same time. They're desperate to find some way that they can keep their control over the world economy, even as their control over the world economy has pretty much all but destroyed that world. And now we have this window of opportunity, Triplegate, Benghazi, IRS, DOJ going after the media. Benghazi Gate is the core. It's the heart. It was a staged stunt to make Obama look good for last year's election, his October surprise. That blew up in his face. Ambassador was killed, no heroic rescue possible. We now know that, indeed, the Treasury Department deliberately leaked the story about the IRS going after the Tea Party to use a lesser scandal to distract from the greater scandal. Then the Department of Justice was going after the phone records of Associated Press and rooms inside the Capitol building itself. Not because of national security. We now know for a fact this was payback, punishment for an act of disobedience by the corporate media. They wouldn't hold a story so that Obama could look really, really good. And the Department of Justice went after them. And none of these worked to serve the ultimate agenda of distracting from Benghazi or getting the corporate media back on the reservation. This has blown up in the White House face, and now they're struggling. They're desperate to start a war. They're looking for any way to get out of this mess. It is a very dangerous time, but it is an historic moment. And what we're seeing right now will be written about in future history books. They'll be making movies about it, just like they made movies about Watergate. And you're living in it right now, and you need to pay attention. And you need to talk to everybody you know to get this information out there. There are a lot of Americans walking around who just aren't paying attention, just like there were a lot of Americans who really weren't paying attention to Watergate until virtually the day before Nixon was finally forced to resign. So in addition to supporting Republic Broadcasting financially, and now is your time to step up to the plate. Have one less beer over the weekend and send that money in. You need to start evangelizing the truth. You need to get out there, because every time you have the courage to speak out publicly, you're going to give those around you the courage to speak out as well. The federal government, the administration, has never been as politically weak as it is right now. Their legitimacy is hanging literally by a thread. And we, the American people, have got the scissors. I hear the music. It's time to get on out of here. Have yourselves a really good weekend. Please think on what I have been saying to you. There'll be a pop quiz on Monday. Have a good weekend. Drive carefully. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay informed. Stay skeptical. Make good choices. Aloha, America.